Alright, so I'm heading down to Dynasty Auto today to finish tuning a 2002 WRX I worked on last week. We started tuning it on the dyno and then realized it had an exhaust leak and a couple other little things. So during the week last week they repaired those issues and we're going to go back and finish it on the dyno today. The car is stock turbo, stock injectors, built motor. The turbo does have 260,000 miles on it, so we're not expecting it to make a ton of power. We're only going to run like 18-19 pounds on it. And that's really all we got going on today. I was going to try to work on the Skyline, but unfortunately there's not going to be anyone at the circuit. There's a few things going on there today, so they're not going to be open long enough for me to work on the Skyline. I did pick up the axles this morning, so they are ready to go. I do need to find a wheel bearing at some point today, and then tomorrow morning we'll pop all that back together in the Skyline and get that thing back on the road. But we're gonna head to Dynasty, get this 2002 WRX finished up, and that's it. We'll see how the day goes from there. So I'm on the dyno with this bug eye. Last week we ended up finding out it had a small exhaust leak that's since been repaired. So I'm going to turn the boost down just a little bit for right now, so that way it doesn't overboost, and we're going to recalibrate all the boost control stuff. It looks like, according to the trims, that the fueling is still pretty well calibrated, at least at idle. So I'm going to just cruise this thing on the dyno for a minute, make sure all the fueling stuff is still correct, and then we're going to throw some boost at it and see what this thing does. So I lowered the wastegate duty quite a bit just so it wouldn't overboost now that we have some changes to the volumetric efficiency by fixing that exhaust leak. So I lowered the wastegate duty quite a bit to about 45-48% for the most part. So now here I'm looking at the boost levels to see what it did and where we need to increase it, by how much we need to increase it, and all that kind of stuff. So as you can see, it hit about, this is the manifold relative pressure, it hit about 18 psi and then started to taper off around 4,800 RPM, which is right around here. So around 4,800 RPM, I'm going to start adding a little bit more wastegate duty, and then we'll clean it up and go from there. There it is. Sorry, I couldn't get to focus. Yeah, about 4,800 RPM is where it about starts to fall off, so we'll start to raise the wastegate duty a little bit there, and then once we get the boost curve nice and flat, we'll kind of bump it up and down a little bit and see where it makes the most power without, burning out the turbo. Now this car has 260,000 miles on the chassis, and this is the original turbo in it still, the original WRX turbo. So the fact that it's still working, period, is pretty good. We are having a little bit of trouble making good amounts of horsepower up top, but surprisingly that's not being limited by the turbo. It's being limited by the injectors themselves. We do have factory injectors in here, so while it seems to be making good peak torque up top, our problem right now is keeping it from tapering too much and trying to make this horsepower curve go up. The only reason why we're not making more up top is because once we hit right around here at 5,400 RPM, the injectors are going above about 90% on the duty cycle, which we don't really want to run them above that. So unfortunately, we're not going to really be able to make much more power up top. So I'm just going to try to clean up a few things in here and make sure everything's good, and this thing will be done. couple points more lean than I would have liked to. Not anything crazy, nothing dangerous, but just a few points. So we are going to add a smidgen of fuel as well. So this is up in the wide open throttle area. It was about 28 manifold absolute pressure, where it started to run a couple points leaner. So up here in the wide open throttle area, I just added a few percent. So it did significantly better on that last pass. It has one small dip right here in the mid-range that I'm going to try and clean up a little bit. Unfortunately, we are about maxed on the injectors up here, so we're not going to really be able to add more boost up there and make more peak power up top. It did just do 220 and 245 at 19 pounds peak. Again, we are on the stock turbo and stock injectors, which are pretty much maxed, so we're not going to be able to make much more power. I'm going to try and clean up this dip right here, and this looks like a little bit of excessive wastegate correction. Not anything too crazy, but I'm just going to clean the wastegate corrections up a little bit so it doesn't do that a nice little wave thing. And that's it. Kind of hard to see because the graph's yellow, but it just did 243 and 265 at about 18.5 pounds. Right, just to the left of that cursor, there's one small little dip. I'm going to add a little bit of boost and try to smooth her out a little bit there. But other than that, this thing is ready to go. So we just did 240 and 270 on our final pull. Again, the injectors are maxed out above about 6,000 RPM, so we can't really do too much through there. I tried to smooth out the small dip in the horsepower curve, but that seems to be all the turbo wants to make through that mid-range right now without really pushing it for everything it's got. And again, this turbo has 260,000 miles, so I think we're going to call it a day with this car. Kind of 240 and 270 on a 2-liter with stock turbo and stock injectors. So I'm pretty happy with it. This car feels great, curves are smooth, AFR is right where I want it, and that's it. Ready to send it. Going to take this thing for a little test drive real quick just to make sure everything's good off the dyno. Which it should be, but we just like to double check it and be sure. So do a couple little pulls and make sure she's good. Gotta remember this thing doesn't have STI brakes.